That hurt.
So painful.
Hello, and welcome to today's Administrative Committee meeting, our first one for 2022. It is Monday, January 24th, and our first item on the agenda is the selection of a committee chair and vice chair. Any strong thoughts from the committee?
Nope.
Nope.
That makes three of us.
Would you like to be the chair?
Sure, I'd be happy
That
to.
sounds great.
Would you like to be the vice chair, Julia?
Sure.
Perfect.
All right, that is that. And that takes us to item number 2, approval of admin committee meeting minutes from December 13th, 2021.
I think we should approve them.
Agreed.
I'm never sure if we can approve them if we weren't on the former committee. Like,
Yeah,
is
you don't
that-
have to be
Oh,
present.
okay.
You can make the action to approve.
to
them.
approve them. Okay.
Good question, though. Item number 3 is Idaho Commission on the Arts, Arts Education Annual Project Grant Application, and we have Megan Cherry to present.
Thank you.
We wish you brought your cat.
Well, she wishes she was here as well. Celebrity she is. Yeah, thank you. So I'll keep this one brief. I know this is a project that many of you are familiar with. This is an annual grant program that we applied for the first time last year. And the funds, if we receive the funds, they would support our Activities Toolbox program, which is an art supply and curriculum toolbox for children and families. It's a pretty neat program in that it's standards aligned curriculum. So they're learning some really great foundational skills in the language of art. And the Arts Commission recommended fewer editions in the year. These have been very popular. We sort of sell out of them. They're free of charge to the public, but we sell out of them really quickly when we make a new edition. So their recommendation was that we make more boxes per edition, but fewer editions, which has a really good impact on sort of reducing staff time in producing the program. They also recommended the addition of like an exhibition workshop component at the end, and that's something that will be welcomed by the grant reviewing committee. That was one of the notes they put on our application for last year. So those are the changes that we would anticipate to the program. This is a program that requires a one-to-one match, which in the case of last year, we used arts department salaries as the match, but we would also put in a request for some Arts Commission funds to support the other half.
Megan, can I just ask, how do you distribute these?
So these are distributed. We use our online content management software called Submittable, and it's what we use for all of our registrations for programs like Art Walk or gallery exhibitions. Farmers markets even using it for some of their programming. And what it allows us to do is we ask them some survey questions as they're filling out their application. And it's a great way for us to kind of get our audiences coming to one place to participate in our programming. And because we're reaching a really different audience with this particular program seems to be popular with a demographic that is not necessarily showing up for our gallery shows. It's really broadened our audience.
Mhm.
So essentially they fill out a form in our, it's a submittable form, and they answer a few survey questions, and then they're invited to pick up their toolbox. Sometimes we overlap it with other programming, so they might be asked to come to entertainment in the park
Mhm.
or winter carnival parade to come and get their toolbox.
And how many years have you done this? Did you say?
This was, let's see, our first edition of the Toolbox was in 2020, and it was in direct response to the pandemic where everybody on the Arts Commission and certainly everybody in the office, we were all really excited to find a way that we could connect with audiences, even though most of our stuff is event-based.
Sure.
So the idea was, okay, we can connect with people this way, but the Arts Commission really had an eye to making sure that it wasn't just giving out art materials. It was rigorous, and that it was accessible to people with families, multiple ages of kids. So we've got three, basically a single set of materials
Yeah.
and then lessons that are targeted to three different age groups. So the first one was in June and or July of 2020. And the Arts Commission did discuss whether this was a program that they felt was important moving out of the pandemic. She says, hopefully, that as we move beyond that need to have contactless engagement with the public, that is that still the priority for them? And they feel that it is something that's a priority. Arts education is a part of their mission that they feel is still prime for growth. So they love the program and would like to see it continue, but we also want to be careful about making sure we're looking for grant funds to support it.
Great. And then just the last thing, how many did you give out last year? Do you remember?
So last year we did 3 editions, and I'm doing this from memory. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. Ish.
Yeah, so there were 153 separate editions and 150
Okay.
individual toolboxes. But then the other part of it is all of the curriculum and
Right.
lessons are available for free online. So anybody can go and download and then provide their own materials. So it's not just limited to that
Great.
group of people.
Thanks.
I love this program. I'm curious, looking at the parameters for the grant request, that the maximum request is 15,000. Do you think we'd ever scale this program if the demand continued?
I think we could, and I also see, I had the benefit of sitting on this grant review panel, and so I got to see the program, the proposals from across the state, and I think what's the ones that were sitting at that higher dollar were more had the workshop, the exhibition, that it was they really like to see programs that are giving students an opportunity to gather and to demonstrate learning. So I could see this being something that grows, maybe not in terms of, oh, we're going to do 20 editions every year, but that we would build upon that with workshops that are in person, opportunities to exhibit. And so I think it's certainly something we could build upon.
Thank you
Yeah.
for clarifying what that would look
Yeah.
like. I know you mentioned staff time in regards to the program too, which I always want to be mindful of, but
And it's always this balance of, are we spending the time doing something that the community loves? In this case, they love this program, and it has a great impact. So that's worth the investment of our time to do it. But we may, yes, we may ask for more funds from this program in the future.
great. Thank you so much. Anything else for Megan?
Mm-mm.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Thank
Just
you.
a note to the committee, I think the application due date is prior to the next council meeting. So
Ah.
this will be on the council agenda for the first meeting in February as ratification of the application. The grant amount was actually fairly small, so we felt it was appropriate that the committee could just approve that and have the council ratify at our next meeting.
Great.
Great.
Do you need an official motion and a vote for that, or?
No, just probably just for the just acknowledgement among the committee that you recommend approval of the grant application.
I do.
Yes.
Yep. It's great.
Great.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. All right. That brings us to our next item, electric scooter and shared mobility program code amendment and license agreement with Cody Riddle. Hi.
New technology. They gave me.
I
a
know,
lot.
right? Woo.
It's a lot of pressure. Yeah, thank you. So we are here, or I'm here to talk to you a little bit about shared mobility today, which I suppose is a fancy technical way of saying we're talking about scooters, bicycles, and other devices, and then more specifically those that use electric assist motors. In addition to the private devices you see around, we continue to see interest in commercial operations wanting to deploy their facilities in Moscow, including on the university campus. And that's probably the biggest reason we're before you today. Most of you are actually probably more familiar with this as it relates to Moscow than I am. There's actually been a lot of work done on this already in previous years. A group reviewed other codes, practices in other communities, including reviewed state law. This went before the Pathways and Transportation Commissions, and then actually culminated in a recommendation or a review by this committee on July 12th of last year, where the group did recommend approval of both the code amendment and license agreement that was included in your packet for this afternoon. So with that, you're not being asked to start from scratch today. This is more of a refresher, and after we walk through things, happy to answer any questions you might have. Bill was actually the author of a lot of this initial work, so may have to lean on him for some of those questions, but we'll walk through the highlights with you briefly if we can. The existing, starting with the code amendment, we're effectively asking you or recommending that you replace Title 11, Chapter 2 City Code that was adopted back, I believe, in 1991. So at 30-something years old, it's not necessarily applicable or perfectly applicable in today's world. It did reference an old pathways map, and then probably not as effective in regulating the things we're after or the things we're being faced with in today's modern world. So again, we are effectively asking to replace that entire chapter, and the intent is to address changes in transportation and then more specifically the use of some of these electric assist devices. So to do so, the new code, I'd like to touch on some of the highlights. Again, it's essentially the draft that was included in your packet is essentially the same one that was reviewed by this committee last summer. It establishes definitions for devices and facilities. It includes operating standards, including speed limits. It provides standards for things like parking, storage, and maintenance, and then clarifies the city's ability to enforce abandoned vehicles and the operating standards. All provisions of the code do address the use of these on roadways, the sidewalks, and then non-motorized pathways in the city. A complete copy of the code, again, was included in your packet, and the draft that we provided hasn't changed. Moving on to the license agreement itself, as mentioned, along with the code, we are proposing a license agreement provision that will require the companies looking to deploy these shared devices, they enter into an annual license agreement with the city. That process will allow us, or will require them to provide us with a local contact available 24 hours for the city, but then also on the devices themselves for the users. It establishes a reporting structure back to the city that updates us on use patterns, maintenance of the equipment, and things like that. Clarifies that these devices can't obstruct the right-of-way in the way they're stored and parked throughout the city. And then as currently written, it does suggest a speed limit in the downtown area of 6 miles per hour, and we'll get back to that here in a second. Also prohibits parking in certain areas. And then most notably, it does allow us to revisit these agreements because they will only be issued on an annual basis. And I think where this is something so new, that's an important fact. Ultimately, when combined with the ordinance, it does allow us to support alternative forms of transportation, which are definitely important. So from our perspective, there have been ongoing conversations with some of these shared mobility providers, and probably the one, I guess, major outstanding concern is just safety of pedestrians as it relates to the speed of these devices, specifically on the sidewalk and how they interact with people just walking, the pedestrians themselves. The original draft license agreement did suggest 6 miles an hour as a speed limit downtown. The providers have balked at that idea. They would like, greater speed limit, but we do remain concerned. Even at 6 miles an hour, that's faster than the typical pedestrian walking on these sidewalks. And at that speed, the devices become unstable. So it is a bit of a challenge. There is a second minor concern with some of the definitions. With the ever-changing technology, I think even Tyler that was here had brought an example of a device that doesn't necessarily fit the definitions we originally drafted. So we'll need to step back and just clarify those divisions or definitions with some very minor changes in the language. Ultimately, we don't want to create a loophole where there's some device out there that's not regulated by this code. Now, in terms of addressing the speed concern, we're suggesting that rather than regulate speed differently in different parts of town, that we can look at a dismount or no ride zone, perhaps around the downtown core. The devices can be regulated quite easily from that perspective. From an enforcement perspective, rather than trying to regulate different speed limits in different parts of town, it's pretty clear if we establish a boundary where someone is in violation of that regulation or not. They could still certainly operate on streets. The ordinance then would regulate speed in the remainder of the city. And again, that I think addresses our concerns from a safety perspective, probably easier to enforce. So today we are, in our recommendation to you, or request, we're asking that we be given, I guess, support to go back and update the definitions to clarify those things that are unclear, not major changes, just getting into wheel size and things like that. And update the proposal to include a dismount zone that we've talked about today. And then with your support, we would take that final proposal to the full council for their approval. Again, that was fairly brief highlight. You've seen this before, so I didn't want to walk you through all of the language again, but happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Thank
Cool.
you so much.
I do have a couple
Please, yeah.
questions. Excuse me. The first, I want to say thanks for the no ride zone. That makes me feel a lot better about this. But one, what about electric wheelchairs? You're not going to be able to dismount and not ride those. Are they limited to the 6 miles per hour? I know they kind of in their own little world, and most people are pretty respectful of them. It's a different version, but I guess legal wise or rule wise, how do we address that?
So the code has an exclusion for those
Okay.
types of devices, as well as police vehicles and e-assist bikes used in police business. So that those exclusions do exist within the code. As Cody mentioned, this actually became the sticking point after the presentation to the council. The committee meeting that happened here in July of last year, we reinforced that desire for us to have that speed limitation and for the vendors to automatically limit it and geofence that area and limit the speeds downtown. And they became very concerned about many of the scooters are ridden in the street, and an individual on a scooter that's limited to 6 miles an hour could be a hazard to themselves and others on the roadway itself. And so they really did encourage us to look at prohibiting the use of them on the sidewalks. We wanted to continue the ability for young children who use sidewalks to ride downtown. And so what we would be establishing is just a dismount zone for e-assist devices in the downtown area. And that'd be universal to both rideshare as well as individually owned devices. And so that's just so we can enforce it
Sure.
equally across everybody. That seemed to be the best resolution to the matter. And so I think that's what we're recommending today.
Again, just to follow up on that, and that makes sense, and I can live with that. But why not have everybody dismount their bikes in that area? I mean, why let kids ride on the sidewalk when they're all over the place too? Why not just have people walk their bikes in that radius, the red radius that you had?
Yeah, just for that long-standing desire to try to provide for the opportunity for kids and families to be able to ride downtown. Potentially, I mean, if we wanted to do a formal dismount zone just on Main Street, but a lot of the side streets in the downtown area help kids and
Okay.
young families traverse their way to downtown on the
Yep.
bike. And so while we do encourage, and we've had the Walk Your Wheels encouragement program, it has not been a prohibition against riding bikes.
Right.
And so that's just one of those that we've tried to accommodate because of our desire
Sure.
to promote the use of bicycles
Right,
as,
and I
as
like
a means
that.
of
You want people to ride.
transportation. In this model, we could at least make a distinction between the e-assist
Yeah.
devices, which is where we're starting, and maybe that's something we could evaluate in more detail in the future.
And then just the last thing to kind of tag on to that, and thank you, and that makes sense, and I get that. Just as someone who almost feels like she's always getting run over by little people on bicycles, so,
Well, and I think as we have more sidewalk cafes and
Yeah,
other
yeah.
things on the sidewalk, it actually begins to discourage people riding a bike because
Right.
it
Yeah.
becomes uncomfortable to do so. And so I think a lot of those expanded sidewalk cafes and other activities on the sidewalk help kind of mitigate
sure.
that a bit compared to maybe back in the older days when we didn't have quite as much
Yeah.
happening on sidewalks.
If and it's my last
No,
one,
please go for it.
I think. If the scooter company or electric bike company, who's liable if they are on the sidewalk and hit somebody and hurts them? Is it the company or is it that individual? Do we know?
It'd be the individual operator. The company can't necessarily control the activity
Mhm.
of somebody who uses the device, so it'd be their responsibility.
Okay.
And I did notice just as we were down in Boise last week, a lot of the scooters had a no riding on sidewalks
Yeah.
placard on top of them, so we could model language
Yeah,
in the
I saw
license
that
agreement
too.
to denote that, say no riding on sidewalks in downtown, just to get that. And there's educational opportunities when they sign on to the app to check out the device, to have a splash page that reminds them of the rules of operation in the
Are they
city.
ticketed? Sorry, I guess I lied. I knew I'd have
It'd
another.
be a violation, yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that a lot.
I've noticed in other communities that there seems to be a problem with these vehicles being abandoned everywhere, all over the place in the Portland River. What kind of mitigation do we have to prevent that?
So they're required to collect and redistribute them on a daily basis and maintain them. We have to have that 24-hour contact. So if we do find a device or see a device abandoned somewhere, we can call them and they have to come collect it. A lot of them have gone to, the rider has to take a picture of where they ended the trip and where they
Oh.
parked the device to help document the fact. I think there's no doubt we live in a college town. We're going to find a few of them in some unusual places, I would guess. So we'll just have to kind of monitor this and see how it goes. But they are responsible for collecting them, redistributing them, maintaining them, charging them, and collecting them when we are found in inappropriate locations.
Okay.
I also had a question. Can we pull that map back up?
Oh, that one?
Yes. So the dismount zone makes sense to me, but what is inside of the blue?
That is, we put this together in all honesty very quickly Friday to get back before the group. The blue is a line off of an old map. So you can
Gotcha.
totally disregard this. Full disclosure, you can
I was like, I missed a
disregard-
special
you can
zone.
disregard the blue.
That's good to know.
Great.
Yeah, I was I think liaison to the Transportation Commission when they started talking about this a couple years ago, and I feel like my opinion was largely formed. There was a few studies that came through that indicated that these are really popular among lower income people for different modes of transportation too, which was really informative, and I appreciate you bringing this forward. And I am assuming this needs to go on the regular agenda because it is.
It will, and it
Yeah.
probably will not proceed at the next council meeting because we do need some time to work through the details of the mapping and the code amendment. It's
Sure.
possible we have a fifth Monday this month, so we do have an extra week, but I wouldn't count on it because we do have further amendments that need to be made. If it doesn't make the first meeting in February, it'll probably be the second meeting, and we would, yes, bring this on regular agenda.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Bill, really quick, just because this is our first meeting of the year, would you mind just giving a quick primer on what would typically go on the consent agenda versus the regular agenda?
Sure. So generally, not that resolutions couldn't, but typically resolutions and ordinances, we always want to go on to the regular agenda. If there's anything that is potentially even, could be considered for consent, but if there's not a uniform agreement among the committee on a particular item, if there's kind of a division of thoughts on it, then we would typically put that on regular agenda to allow the opportunity for the full council to consider it. But largely it's, ordinances and resolutions typically will not do on consent. Those are going to go regular agenda item. More significant issues that will have public interaction and visibility, we want to make sure we get those on regular agenda as well. But things like Megan's art grant today, the fairly small grant, we typically put that on consent agenda.
Great.
So it's certainly resolutions and ordinances are not going to go on to the consent agenda. Other things, it kind of depends upon the magnitude, the particular issue, the public awareness we're trying to raise, and we can make that judgment as we go.
Thank you for the refresher. That brings us to the end of our regular agenda and on to reports. And we have at least two today, starting with the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, or PBAC Community Survey Report. And we have, it looks like, Tyler Palmer with us today.
Yes, and I'm going to be joined, I'll be joined by Mr. Paul Kimmel as well, who is
Welcome.
the Latah County representative for PBAC. Counselors, it's great to be with you all today.
Hello.
And Paul has some documentation he's going to distribute to you. So it's just a quick refresher. PBAC is the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee. The Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee is the organization through which we participate cooperatively with the other users, the pumpers from our basin. The entirety of the Palouse Basin draws its water from aquifers. There are two different aquifers in Moscow that we draw from. We have a shallower aquifer called the Wanapum and a deeper aquifer called the Grand Ronde. But ultimately, we're all drawing from the same basin. And so that includes the large pumpers are the city of Moscow, the University of Idaho, Washington State University, and the city of Pullman. Then we have participation from both Latah and Whitman County. And we also have Palouse that actually kicks in a little bit of money, the city of Palouse as well, to help with some of the administrative costs. And so it's been an exciting time as we're working with PBAC. We've known that there was a water issue almost since the area was settled back in the late 1800s. So it's a problem that's been worked on for a long time. We've known that we need an alternative water supply. We have a declining aquifer that declines at a rate that that would outstrip our ability to conserve our way out of the water issue. And so we need to be looking at conservation, certainly, but also we need to be looking at alternate water supplies. And so as we've worked toward that solution, it's been very important for us that we stay engaged with the community. We're talking about large scope projects here, potentially, upward of $100 million. And so as we do that, we feel like it's very important that this is a community solution. And in order to have a community solution, the community needs to understand the problem. And that's been a big part of the work that we've done. And as we've progressed, it's become more important. We've done some alternate water supply studies. We currently have a study with Dr. Robin Nimmer, who's here with us in the audience today, that's working on refining those alternatives and really getting down to brass tacks and figuring out what's going to be the best alternative for our community, and then starting to pursue funding in a project. So this is truly an exciting time. We're talking about historic infrastructure work that we're doing here. And Paul chairs our communication subcommittee for the Pollution Basin Aquifer Committee. So we're here today to talk about the results of a survey that was conducted through the Pollution Basin Aquifer Committee to try and gauge the understanding of the issue and attitudes toward the issue among the community. So Paul's going to review those findings with you this afternoon.
Gee, thanks, Tyler. That was very nice and comprehensive. So thank you. Thanks for the time today, all of you. Yes, so you have hard copies, but I told Taylor I also have an electronic copy of this that I'll make sure y'all get copies of too. We started a subcommittee on communications several years ago. I mean, again, some of you or all of you have been to our water summit, which was an effort just to increase awareness. We moved the dial, but it's once a year and about 300 people, and half of them are the usual suspects, and the other half, are gone in 4 years. So it was really about designing a more sustainable, long-lasting outreach and communication strategy. And with Robin Nimmer and Alta, this was a component in the alternative water supply work that she is doing. So we have a communication plan within her work as well. So this was just a great effort to really just reach out and see what our communities know or don't know about water. So, and Robin's been really fabulous to work with. We also have an intern, a social media intern at PBAC, Ashley Ford, who is fabulous. She is down in Boise, and she works a few hours a week or a month on behalf of PBAC. So much of the visuals that you see in this report are hers. I'm not claiming ownership of that necessarily, but so we wanted to, and this is something I wanted to do for years, is a basin-wide community survey. It's like, what do we know? What do we don't know? So with that, just again, it talks a little bit about when we conducted the poll. We had 306 respondents, which made it statistically valid. So we were really pleased with that. And again, we picked up this brand identity called Conserve, Stabilize, Thrive. So conserve water, stabilize the aquifer, and still continue to thrive as communities. So our respondents, what do they look like? We had great cross-section of ages, from younger high school students, college students, which is always a concern here when you do survey work, that you get a little too much bias in the college level, but we didn't. So good spread of ages, a few more females than males, not surprising there. A good balance between Moscow and Pullman on the location of where these folks reside. So, excuse me, well-educated, which is not surprising at all. This is consistent with the demographics of the Palouse anyway. Mostly employed people. So again, this was also a way to sort of tease out, make sure it wasn't just students answering this. The next section was really about awareness on the aquifer, what they know about PBAC, as well as what they know about the aquifer. So we asked them where they got information about PBAC. So this was really encouraging that social media is working with people, but we can certainly do more of that. City information is always good, newspaper, and then the website. So nothing too surprising there. And again, I kind of scatter some verbatims along the way, but people still at the end of the day like to get something in snail mail. And I think you guys still do your water newsletter.
We have a utility
Quarterly.
billing newsletter that goes
Is
out
that quarterly or
monthly.
monthly? Okay, yeah. So again, people like that, but that's only Moscow.
I'm curious if I may, what the other category, it's kind of large. Do you have a sense of what that is?
You know, it could be something on a bulletin board. It could be something in the co-op newsletter
A
or
lot of nonprofit outreach. So we'll get asked to give presentations to the Lions Club or the League of Women Voters. So I think that a decent number will see different presentations that are given in some of those venues as well, Ann.
Great.
Paul, how was the survey distributed? How did people become aware they could participate?
we did press releases. It was a Google poll.
Okay.
So again, just pushed it out.
I was curious if they heard about it on social media. That's naturally where they received the information.
got
So you
some-
kind of have a self-selection of the sample
Yeah.
because of how that was distributed.
Yeah, we got radio publicity, press released in the Daily News. So
And then also, it was pushed out on both cities' social media
Social media
pages and
sites.
counties as
Right,
well. Yeah.
So question about, have you even heard about PBAC? Again, good confirmation that most people had. So again, that kind of gives us and encourages us to, okay, we don't have to keep explaining ourselves. Let's start really diving into more educational content in our communications. Question about where do we source our water? And overwhelming majority know it comes from groundwater, which was again another good confirmation, and the fact that it is a declining aquifer.
So what do you take of the none of the above, the 11% response?
Or it could be, I don't know.
It's
Maybe
rain.
they were like,
It's humid enough.
Oh,
we just
below.
Yeah,
split it.
rain and
For-
humidity.
As a committee, this series of data was actually really encouraging. We've really tried to ramp up our outreach efforts. And for the longest time, you talked about, where does your water come from? And a lot of people just shrug their shoulders, which is, you think about the history of humanity, it's a pretty anomalous thing. Just at the last little blip, would we be able to say, I don't even know where it comes from. I don't know where it goes. So this was really encouraging to see that most people had heard of the entity, and it's quite especially that people understood. It was very encouraging to see that over 90% understood that we've got a water problem, which that was a very encouraging statistic.
Yeah, so none of the above, Bill. I would say, that things like they get it at Safeway, or water comes from Safeway.
I didn't know
It's
if
kind
there
of
was a don't
food.
know response, and that's what ended up there. Or?
Yeah, so
I'm glad to see nobody thought it was from our giant lake that we don't have.
yes,
Right?
exactly. Exactly.
Atlanta Spring Valley.
And then we wanted to do a little deeper dive into conservation and whether people are actually participating in conservation and what exactly are they doing. So this was really good information, validated a few things as well as it's helping us identify more opportunities for water conservation. And you can see water. First question was about water use. Compare yourself to your neighbor and the community. Do you think you use more than your neighbor? About the same, below average. So interesting, about a third said I use less than most people. About a third said, about average. And then a few actually admitted they used more. So
Is there any way to know what neighborhoods those came from?
no,
Yeah,
we
this
didn't do
wasn't
any sort of
geographically.
That's what I was afraid, but that'd be I don't know. That's just kind of a cool
Mhm.
thing to see.
Yeah, good question. Question about the importance of water conservation, which was really good. Again, yes, I try to use as little as water as I possible can, and the other was yes, but I'd like to do more. So that's really encouraging. 85% between those two categories. The next one talks about the programs that the two cities have, and some of those specific program offerings. And again, this was a really interesting finding here. The public expressed that water conservation is important, but they want to do more. They also expressed interest in the city programs, suggesting an opportunity to expand those. So again, I think that's good. So your conservation programs are working, but there's an appetite to improve even more.
This is something that it has been encouraging as we've looked at. We're in the process now at reviewing our conservation plan. It's amazing to realize that conservation plan is already 8 years old, and so we're taking the opportunity to take a look at that. But as Paul mentioned, it's really encouraging to see that people want to do more and that they'd like to know more about those programs, especially given that Moscow and Pullman both have some of the lowest per capita usage in the state. We have really, really good water usage numbers, but our people are interested in even doing more. So that's encouraging.
Thanks, Tyler. And then we just ask some open-ended questions, share concerns, other comments. A lot of people said they just wanted to be more involved in the water situation, the conversation. A lot of concern about the condition of the water, the resource itself. And so this next section talks about some of those polling questions, the concerns and comments. And the overriding themes were, hey, we're concerned about the growth that continues to happen, coupled with the declining aquifer, this new development. What are they doing? Are they bringing some solutions to the game or not? So again, really rich comments. And we're not going to go through all those. I would encourage you to just kind of look at some of those. Some really very insightful stuff. People are concerned about aquifer storage and recharge. Putting treated water into a pristine aquifer was a big concern. A lot of questions around new development. What are they going to bring to the table? Should we be doing more? Do we mandate it, or do we try and incentivize it, or that? So continuing to encourage cooperation with PBAC between the communities. A lot of comments around reducing lawn irrigation as well. And again, you've got a program for that with your Y-scaping. Let's see. Just more information about the situation with the aquifer. A question or a concern or comment about, are we doing enough to marry the water situation into our comprehensive planning and city code? And again, lots of questions about, well, why are you continuing to approve these large developments if we've got a water situation? So again, and then the next section just gives you a list. We ask about, so what are you doing with respect to water conservation? And give us some other suggestions. So I thought the one was classic. It was third bullet down. Just they said they drink beer.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising. Flushing frequently, again, shorter showers. I mean, the usual stuff, but really, really good stuff, really insightful. So key takeaways, good awareness. We've got more work to do. Again, we wanted to just establish a baseline of water understanding and awareness because it's really going to be integral in how we continue to engage, refine the work that Robin is doing when we actually tee up an additional water supply. Are we confident that we've had these kinds of conversations and really understand our communities? So I've been encouraged. We're working now with the stakeholder engagement group, and we'll get back in front of them with the findings. We're still going to present to the City of Pullman Council in 2 weeks. Then we'll be out and kind of just do a full-blown to the community, say thank you, and here's what we heard, and we are listening, kind of thing. And then we've got some other strategies scheduled for the rest of 22.
Was there anything you were wishing to see or find out that didn't come up, and you were just like, oh, why didn't this? Kind of fishing for something that didn't bite.
Not really. Yeah.
I think for me, like one of the things I was really hoping to see play out is that some of the outreach efforts that we've taken have had an impact, and people have heard about the problem and are aware that there is a problem. I mean, it's always, on such a basic level, the first step in solving a problem is admitting we've got a problem and understanding we have a problem. And so that to me really popped out. That was very encouraging to see such a high percentage of people understanding that.
Yeah. We also didn't want to, get too far down the road with the alternatives.
Right.
So tell us which alternative makes the most sense to you. We're not there yet.
Right.
We really aren't. I mean, with full respect to Robin and her work. Let's see how that product ends up. It's going to be an impressive study. We've got building a great matrix, a decision matrix, and I think we're going to have plenty of more conversations in the months ahead.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be back in front of the council on water issues lots of times. We'll be back talking about a lot of different varieties of just how we're progressing with water, reports on what we're doing, what's going on. And so that'll be a fairly constant talking point as we work forward on this.
So
We look forward to it.
Yeah, and PBAC is a really great governance model that a lot of other regions look to. They respect the work we do, the fact that we work across the state line. But again, at some point in the future, it's going to get real. This is a wicked problem, and we're going to really have to step up and figure it out. So.
Any questions?
Any questions from the committee?
Oh, it looks like a good start on gathering some public opinion, but I just would emphasize that it is self-selected. So you're going to have people that are more engaged in PBAC and the water issues that choose to do the survey. So I would just be careful on how broadly you assume the results can be applied.
Yep, absolutely.
I think it's fun having the qualitative stuff at the end. We don't get
Yeah.
that a lot. I'm getting sucked in a little bit. Perfect. Thank you both so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And our next report, Downtown Parking Program Update with Mia Batista and Anthony Dollinger. Hello, welcome.
So the reason we're here this afternoon is because we've had some recent law changes that have affected Idaho finally. I mean, the law changes happened a while ago in another circuit, and I'll have Mia explain that here in a little while ago, but it's just now come home to roost here in Idaho. So we've had to make some changes in the way that we're currently enforcing the downtown parking, but then also we've got to look into the future now with this change. How are we going to go about potentially overcoming that and changing things? And so I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I'll let Mia explain the legal aspect of it.
Sure. So what we've done prior to recently is the way we've enforced our parking enforcement is our code enforcement officers will walk around and they'll chalk a tire and then go back, and if you can tell by where that chalk mark is whether they've moved or not. If not, and if this beyond the time frame permitted, then they will often receive a parking ticket. Well, in 2019, in the 6th Circuit, so we're in the 9th Circuit. So in the 6th Circuit, there was a city that followed the very same practice where their law enforcement officers, that's how they would monitor parking, and that's how they would move forward with code enforcement. Well, this person who got a lot of parking tickets through the course of many years decided to challenge that. The district court held in favor of the state. It got appealed, ultimately went up to the 6th Circuit, and the 6th Circuit made the decision, held that the action of the chalking the tire is a search. And you're gathering information without probable cause to suspect that any crime has been committed when you take that action of marking the tire. So at 6th Circuit, we were aware of it. We talked about it. We've been talking about ways, not 6th Circuit doesn't apply to 9th Circuit, but sometimes, what law happens in one circuit will trickle down to ours. And so we've been talking about different ways of enforcement. Well, in October of 2021, our Idaho Supreme Court was reviewing a case involving a drug dog search. And the question, and I know this is kind of a long way to get to where we're at, but I have to provide some background here. In that case, the dog ultimately put its nose through a window and then alerted on the car. And so the question was the dog and, putting his nose through the window, was that a search? So here's where I'm now bringing this back full circle. So our Idaho Supreme Court look to the 6th Circuit case, recognizing it's not squarely on point, recognizing it's not controlling law for Idaho, but found it instructive and said, and I'll quote here now, though not squarely on point and certainly not binding on this court, we find that the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals decision in Taylor is instructive and held and they said that the dog breaching the open window was also a search. So what this tells us is that our Idaho Supreme Court, if we were ever challenged with the way we do code enforcement, we have a good look. We have a good, look as to how they would interpret that. And it's been my recommendation that we look at other methods of enforcement with what we have here with this recent case from the Supreme Court, that they would in fact find this as a search and we should find another method for enforcement. So shared that with our law enforcement and administration. And so I'll let you take it over
Okay.
from here.
So after that meeting with me and that decision was made, I looked to my parking enforcement personnel for ways in which we could still enforce the downtown parking without using chalk. We came up with a temporary solution, which involves, we use a product called AIMS for our ticketing purposes and enforcement purposes. And they've got these basically cell phones with an application on them that they can log lots of information, including license plates, locations, those kinds of things. And that's also where they write their tickets from. We found out through talking to the company, there was already a way in the system to basically digitally mark the tire by way of marking where the valve stems are. And so I sent them out for a couple of weeks and I said, oh, please try this out. Let's see how it potentially could work. So the feedback I got was, yes, it kind of works. It takes more than quadruple the amount of time because now instead of walking very quickly, marking a tire, excuse me, they have to log every license plate, what block of the street it is on, and the tire stems, and take a picture. And then they have to come back around. And so the temporary solution has been, we're still out there enforcing, but it's just not the breadth of enforcement that we've been able to do in the past and what we would like to do. So in that, I started doing some research. Luckily, we've got a couple of universities right here, and luckily they both use the AIMS system. So it's the same company. I found out that the University of Idaho uses kiosks as well as a mobile app through AIMS for their parking enforcement. And then I also found out that WSU uses a license plate reader technology through AIMS. They have a mobile enforcement as well. So I went and talked to both entities, tried to get as much information as I could very quickly, which I'll go ahead and pass that out. I've got just some little packets of information here.
Thank you.
And this certainly is not the end all be all, but this is just kind of an idea of what we may be looking at going to in the future. And there is obviously a financial investment tagged onto this. And just to be straightforward, I mean, it's going to be probably around $200,000 to go to this system, but there's a lot of benefits that go along with that. Not only are we going away from the chalking, but quite frankly, we're getting with the 21st century where, folks are used to going to bigger cities and things and using applications on their phones for marking where they are, paying for parking, that kind of thing. And then the kiosks would be, because of course, being a university town, we have lots of visitors, and not every visitor is going to want to come to town and download an application on their phone. So that gives them the ability to walk up and use a kiosk for the same purposes. Now you've heard me say, excuse me, you've heard me say pay to park several times. That doesn't mean we're going to a paid system. These systems luckily are very customizable. You can make them do almost anything you possibly could want. And so,
including eventually pay to park, should we go that route?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But there is certainly a way that we could keep the 3-hour parking as it is. The biggest caveat to that would be, instead of the traditional way of folks driving around the block, hoping to get getting their same spot back to wear that chalk off, we would have to go to zones, some sort of a zone system where they would have to literally move from one area to another so that our enforcement wouldn't mistake them for being, it's not as accurate. We can't say that car was in that exact spot 2 hours ago. We have to have them move. So just a little bit on that. So the license plate reader is pretty straightforward. It's just costly to install. But that would give our enforcement officers a lot easier way. They can literally just drive down the street and that license plate reader is reading the tags and marking them. And then if there's a violation, they stop and they can issue a citation. There is on there, we did receive a quote on the back of the first page there, and that is for one unit, which includes the license plate reader, a laptop to go along with it, the enforcement software, all of those kinds of things. I gave you a slip after that, the Ames mobile pay. That just gives you a little information on the current application that they use for that. I stole this from the university. I didn't steal it. They gave it to me. But this is something that they have on signs if you've seen them around town, or around campus. They've got the code that you can scan, tells you exactly what you can use, where you are, those kinds of things to help people. And these are also posted on their kiosks. So that's just something that if we were to go to that, an example of maybe what we'd go to. And then the last thing, this Flowbird is the company that the University of Idaho uses. That's the only reason I printed it out, but this would be an example of one of those kiosks. And just for y'all information, each one of these kiosks cost around $6,500. So that's a part of that financial burden on this. But that is, like I said, very, very quick, very small amount of research that I did just to kind of get us thinking to what maybe we might need to go to in the future.
So we want to bring this to the committee today. This obviously was not anticipated during the formation of the FY22 fiscal year budget. What the code enforcement folks are doing right now really isn't sustainable in the long term. The short-term fix is really not going to work for us to be able to effectively manage the program. We will be working on contacting vendors, developing a proposal, and probably bringing that to the council for the council's consideration. We did receipt just a little over $200,000 last year. There was unanticipated revenue that came from the lot sales in Alturas Technology Park that the Urban Renewal Agency owned and then had committed to previously return those lot sale revenues to the taxing districts. So fortunately, we did receive some funding that is about of the equal magnitude and scale of what this program is likely going to require. But we wanted to bring this to your attention, let you know that we will be working on a proposal and you should see something here probably in the next 2 months.
Great.
Hey, yikes.
It's interesting that the court thinks that the chalk is invasive, but this is somehow not. Like, this seems so much more invasive,
Right.
to have everybody's license plate and know where they're parking.
The difference is that's available and open to the public. You're not physically touching the
Touching.
vehicle. You're not doing anything to the vehicle itself. So the vehicle being parked there, it's open to the public. It's open to the, right now we could just take a picture like we are, but it's not efficient.
So this might sound really dumb, and that's okay. But why can't you chalk next to the tire on the pavement?
Well, we talked about that. Not only is that easy to remove, but there's obviously some weather issues that would
Oh,
make that
yeah.
impossible for a good chunk of the year.
Sure. I knew it was dumb.
We're the ask.
Not dumb.
I think they explored all options, including that one.
I don't know if you know these numbers off the top of your head, but I am curious what the revenue that is brought in from parking enforcement downtown is annually.
I don't. We'll have that information when this comes forward to you in the future. The revenue itself, I want to say, is in excess of maybe 100 to 115,000 per year annually. But then we have the program cost, the administrative cost to run it. Net income off the program, I think, is closer to that 20 to 25,000 per year above expenses that we incur to operate the program. It's likely this system would be potentially more efficient at identifying violations. And so you may expect to see that revenue increase just based on the foot patrol. They can only make so many rounds, so many times per day. This system will make it more efficient to, at least in the areas where the vehicle can read it. So all the angled parking and park in the Jack Street lots or on street, that it'll probably likely be more efficient than currently just the foot patrols are. But that's kind of the general amount of money and I'm going from history that we've been able to, because generally anything that is receded in the parking fines as in excess of operational costs gets shifted over for parking lot improvement programs in the downtown area. So that's kind of been the scale of funding that we have seen in that program over the years. But I can certainly research that and get you very specific, detailed information when this comes back to the committee for consideration.
That'd be great. You answered my follow-up question was where that revenue went, because it seems like over at some period of time, this could pay for itself, but it sounds like it might be quite a while potentially.
Yeah, we'd have to see how the program, and if we continue with the 3-hour parking, it's just based on violations. At some point in the future, if the council considers pay to park, then that would be a different model of revenue collection. But for the time being, I think our goal is just to find a way that we can continue with the existing parking system that has seemed to function well for downtown.
And I'm right that not everyone has to have a phone to be able to use this.
No, that would be the kiosk.
Yeah.
Yep.
And thank you both for doing the legwork to present this info to us and having those
Certainly.
conversations with the universities as well. Anything else for these two?
All right now.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other staff reports today, Bill?
There are not this afternoon.
Then I think we're set to adjourn.
Yes. Thank you.